Hi everybody. I'm Kelly, part of the 72 crew. And Ian, I feel like you need no introduction because you've had like 16 shout outs and ramp ups already from previous times.
I paid them well. And I think it was great about Dave's presentation, and obviously with Tim, you saw a bit of the art and science coming together. And I think my group is kind of a combination of those things as well. So looking forward to the discussion.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about like the art and science of influence, which is what he does, that no matter what sector you work in, I think there's some really cool shit to share and some good things to learn. Okay, your title, I learned yesterday, has another word in it now. So it's SVP of Social and Influence and Content Marketing for the NFL, which is a lot to unpack. So if you could like pretend you were talking to your 10-year-old self, how would you describe what you do at work every day?
Okay, so 10-year-old self, similar to Dave, 10-year-old Ian thought he was actually going to be playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is well before social media was invented, so no idea that I'd be working in the capacity I am right now with the league, but always had a dream of working at the NFL. I can promise you I've watched every single pass Ben Roethlisberger's thrown in his entire 18-year career, going all the way back with my dad. We watched football all the time, and it was a great way for us to connect with our family across the country. And we have a lot of family in Pittsburgh, so it brought us closer to them. I think that's really the beauty of football, the sense of community. It's unlike any other sport, particularly in this country. And so for us to have the ability to work inside the league and actually help build communities across the country and across the globe now is really, really special. And to Tim and Dave's point earlier, it's a huge responsibility and something we take very, very seriously.
That's amazing. I grew up in the Steelers household myself.
You know,
Yeah, I did.
Fun fact, my dad, who recently passed, but he went to high school with Mike Ditka. And there are these football factories that exist all across the country in places like Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, and places in down Alabama and so on. And it's really special when you go into those small towns and you really see how much football is a part of the fabric of those communities. And that's how I grew up. So it's pretty special being here.
All right. Well, I'm glad your young self would be pretty impressed with adult self. I don't know if everybody can say that. So,
I think he'd be pretty happy.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So you've been on the team here for just over 3 years.
Correct.
And in terms of social media, content, culture, there's been a pretty seismic transformation in how the NFL is showing up in the world and online. Can you tell us about some of the biggest pivots you made and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that every year, the evaluation of what we're doing, it needs to change, right? When I first came and Tim brought me over, we worked together at Activision, which was terrific. A couple of things stood out to me in terms of what we were doing from a social perspective. One, we weren't leaning heavy enough into the youth-centric platforms. So really looking at dialing up our programming. And two, and it goes back to the points they were making earlier, just around this idea, and Tim has coined this, which is this idea of mass intimacy. And what that really means is that we're telling stories. We're telling intimate stories with players with their helmets off. Like a great example is that TV spot, the Super Bowl spot. But how do you extend that to engage the younger fan? And how we do that is through a variety of different means. It's certainly not all through the broadcast. So when I started, we noticed that we had a few of these content creators that were called live content correspondents. And so just imagine young 20-somethings with cell phones and cameras that would go to games and capture content and look for some of those more intimate moments. What we have done over the last couple of years is really scale that up. So now we've got over 100 content creators all across the country, which feed our social channels. And that's really when you think about Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, people are going there for very specific reasons and very different reasons, right? So we have to make sure that the content fits the platform. And even inside the platform, there are different products, right? So what you're doing on Instagram stories is different than what you're doing on Instagram Reels. And what you're doing on Twitter Spaces is different than what you're doing on Twitter, on normal Twitter. So it's one of those things where it's a constant challenge, because to keep up with the platforms is really, really a big challenge. And we try to do the best we can. We've got an incredible internal team that we oversee, and It's one of those things where it's a constant chase. It's kind of one of the things I've always said is that social media is the constant chase. It's never going to be perfect, but you have to be aggressive in getting after it and not let platforms like TikTok launch and you're absent for a year. Well, you just lost out on 500 million people that have got that platform and are going there every single day. So for us, it's been a really fun ride. We've got incredible collaborators internally as well across the department. So it's been fun to see social kind of weave our way through not just marketing, but sponsorship, consumer products, events, and so on.
You were sharing with me the other day a little bit about their monetization successes you've had too, which I think people will find intriguing.
Yeah. So yes, we've and this our business development team deserves a lot of credit. Our sales and sponsorship teams deserve a lot of credit, but they need something to sell against. So I can't tell you the number. It's not a public number, but we make a significant amount of money off of our social media channels. We do that through the partnerships that we have with each of the big major platforms, but we also now are increasingly driving more and more sponsored content through our social channels. So there are Sundays that you'll look on NFL social, and up to 83% of our posts are actually sponsored, right? So we're driving revenue back through, and we're doing that with platform right creative. We're trying to stay away from just logo slaps and doing things that would actually drive engagement down and hurt the algorithm. And that's been a big sea change for us as well, to work collaboratively with partners like Procter & Gamble and EA and many others to create dynamic social content that's platform right. So as we've done that, the monetization has gone up 3x in the last couple of years, and it's going to continue to grow.
That's incredible. I would say like a lot, this has come up a lot in previous talks, but being a football or NFL fan these days does feel like a bit of a full-time job. It's like 24/7.
Tell me about it.
There's so much content coming at you from the league, from publishers, from players, from fans, video gaming, fantasy, betting. I mean, it's everywhere. And it seems like your team is in all those spaces all the time. Embrace the fire. Is that what you said? Yeah, you're in the fire. So what are some big wins you've had? What are some corners of culture you've kind of stepped into that you were particularly?
Yeah. So going back to the insights and the data, what we found is that, especially looking at our younger audiences, there were certain verticals that they over-indexed with, right? So if you look at music, fashion, and gaming in particular, those were the ones that really over-indexed with our fans, and coincidentally, that over-indexed with our players as well. So what were the opportunities to find those conversion points to tell those stories off the field and of course on the field as well? So as we've done that, a lot of that content is driven through our players, finding their passion points and creating those stories off of that. And in addition, our influencer program. Our influencer program, now we have access to over 2,000 influencers across the world. And it's really designed to go one-to-one with the influencer. We're trying our best to build real relationships with influencers. It's not based on how much are you going to pay me to show up to a game or how much are you going to pay me to post this. We have excellent content. We know that we can partner together and help each other build our brands together and build our audiences together. We have scale. We've got amazing opportunities we can provide them. So in doing so, it's really a win-win for these influencers. So that's been a really big part of it. And if you look across our social channels on a weekly basis, and I've worked on some big brands before, like Call of Duty and Red Bull, what we do at the league from a content perspective, we're talking about 1,500 pieces of content a week that are going out across our social channels. So to put that in perspective, a normal brand, even a really high-powered brand, would be pushing out maybe 50 to 100 pieces of content, and that's one that's aggressively after it. So there's a lot going on the programming side. So I have to give a shout out to my team. They do such a terrific job at programming social channels. So it's not just a one-dimensional of it's another football highlight. That's great. That's not why fans are coming to our channels like TikTok and Snap and so on.
That's a big feat. We've been blown away by the postseason activity. You guys have been like a fire hose of stuff. We're wondering when you sleep.
We don't really sleep that often. No, it's a 7-day-a-week job, and you never know. One of the fun things, and sometimes not so fun things, is that you never know when a Tom Brady retirement announcement is going to come, right? Like he's not giving the heads up to the social team of, hey, I'm going to retire in the next 2 days. Like, you have no idea when that stuff is going to happen. And so when it does, our fans expect us to be on the trigger within minutes. So there is a big responsibility to do that and to also verify what we're doing is actually accurate. So the Tom Brady case study is an interesting one. We can talk about that if you want, but it's a fun ride, to say the least. And you have to love social. If you don't like social and you don't like football, this ain't the place for you.
I think it's a good story to tell. I mean, you know, there is from time to time some controversy around the league, and I'm sure.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But I'm sure people are out there wondering, like, how looking at social to see how you guys are going to respond. So, like, what happens behind closed doors? How do you know when to engage in conversation, when not to?
Yeah. So I think this is a really interesting point for brands, like all of you, the brands you work with, who are touching on sensitive topics and topics that really will charge up the emotion with folks. So for us, we do the best job we possibly can to verify the sources that are actually putting out the information, right? So if it's just Adam Schefter who's putting out something, we're not touching that. But if it's Adam Schefter and multiple other sources that we trust and we have a line to get a better understanding of like how firm is this, then we will actually begin to move. With Tom, that situation was very unique because it was multiple sources and I'm not trying to, TV12 brand is amazing, but his own brand tweeted out that he was retiring. So that's when we thought, we're good to go. And we went, and then, shortly thereafter, you're just thinking in your chair thinking, oh boy, dad's on TV talking about not retiring now, and what are we going to do? And I would just recommend for those of you who manage social teams and oversee your social groups, it's not about deleting posts. Like once it's out in the wild, it's out in the wild. It's about trying to be as transparent and accurate as you can and coming back to that story and saying, and that's what we did that night. We said, actually, there's new information. He hasn't confirmed that he's retiring. And I think fans generally understand that, right? That we're not trying to get it wrong. We're not trying to get out too quickly over our skis. That was one of those stories that was all over the world. And it just shows you how freaking fast news like that can travel. I mean, it was everywhere within 10 minutes. And so from a social perspective, you're thinking like, we're late and we knew for 5 minutes that it happened, right? So it's a very interesting world.
I mean, it's a good example though, because I don't know. I think a lot of brands have such a fear of backlash that they're very scared to do even simple things. So how do you manage the sentiment, the responses, the comments? Like how do you keep a tough upper lip through all of that?
So I will give a big shout out to Tim. He's an amazing CMO to work for. He believes in the power of social and the storytelling that's possible through social channels. It's not just we're posting updates and news flashes and those types of things. There's a wide array of things that we're doing to engage our younger fans and also even our older fans, right? So that's super important. The other piece is that we have an always on listening team that's constantly listening to what's happening in the conversation. And what I would just advise you all as marketing experts and with each of your brands is that it's not just about relying on the tools. There are some amazing tools out there, and we do rely on a variety of them, but it's also about the human intelligence. And we have incredible folks who've got reps and multiple years at the league who understand the context of what's happening. So we look at things like volume. We also look at things like sentiment, but you're not going to pull through a ton of sentiment on some of the channels that are emerging, right? Like on TikTok, if someone's posting a video and analyzing that video, like what does it actually mean? What are they saying? Or even things like emojis are really tough for tools to analyze. So I might be saying it's a fire, and that's usually good, but it could be also translated as bad, right? So those nuances are very, very important for us to monitor, and it gives us a good sense of what direction some of these stories are going and how much heat they have in them, both good and bad.
Can you talk more about the helmets off approach and how it translates in social? I know Tim teed up a lot of it, but it looks like you've made incredible headway in a few short years in that front.
Yeah, yeah, we have. I think we've done a pretty good job on that front. The live content correspondence that I mentioned before, these young content creators, they have relationships with the clubs. So each of the clubs have their own LCCs they work with, but increasingly the players are asking for their as well. And that's great for us. They have a level of trust with their content creator, and they're bringing them in closer and closer. So a great example with Glenn's team, the Seahawks, Russell Wilson basically adopted our LCC, and I kid you not, he basically lives at his house and is capturing all this content with he and Ciara, a lot of great stuff with them traveling, a lot of stuff that we wouldn't normally have access to, fashion shows, award shows, these types of things that are great from a storytelling perspective, and they broaden who he is, especially with our audience, which is terrific. And we have that now at scale with players, across all 32 teams. And for us to be able to develop those storylines, especially with younger players who are coming up, who may not have 10 million social media followers, but we can help get them there, right? So that's a really exciting piece of our job.
Probably a good segue to TikTok, because I think that's where that strategy is really shining. The players are there, like absolutely being themselves, giving people that whole TikTok, people being people thing they crave in that channel. So how did you guys entering TikTok versus maybe other platforms you've been in? Yeah,
I mean, we, again, in partnership with our business development team, we identified that as a platform that we wanted to move on. And, I can say confidently that we helped push things along to get to a place where it was still so nascent. You didn't really know what direction it was going to go. And we're still developing our own voice on TikTok, right? So once we finalized our deal, we soon realized after testing a bunch of different content that actually the highlights, which performed so well on Twitter and other platforms, didn't perform well at all on TikTok. What performed well on TikTok were guys in emotional storytelling and humor. Those are the things that really drove to the top. And for us, we wanted to find more and more ways to program that way and not really compete against the other platforms of what we do from a on the field perspective. So as we've done that, we've now developed this creator program, which I give a huge credit to my team who focuses specifically on TikTok. They've identified dozens and dozens of these young content creators on platform. And there's a degree of a collaboration that's unlike any other platform, I would say, in some cases, or in most cases, and that we're identifying who they are and we're letting them create. And that's something that I think, to Tim's credit, probably wasn't something we were doing a lot of as a league in previous years. So I think we have a video here of Emily that I'd love to show if we can show it. So I think it's a great example of how we work with content creators, especially on a platform like TikTok.
Actually, the other one, if we could play that one first. There she is.
I graduated college with a degree in design and recently redesigned some logos I thought needed help. After going through the comments, a lot of large brands reached out to me for a new logo, so I said yes. A really bad logo. This is my redesign of Adobe. I really think I blew it out of the park. Like a waste of space to me. So this is your new logo. Nicole reached out to me. They do sports like football and such. So I redesigned it in a much more patriotic way. I'm pretty sure he is the president of the football in America.
Thanks to Emily, we now have this beautiful new logo for the NIFL. And because we are the NIFL, we also wanted to lend our resources to Emily. Just like Emily, I have a passion for graphic design, and I thought her profile picture could use some spicing up. So I did some digging and thought this best represents you. And also a name tag, because I'm just not good with names.
Next, I did Detroit's football team, the Lions, and I don't really understand your logo. So I just cleaned it up, and this will look a lot nicer on jerseys, helmets, merchandise.
What a lion at? They don't even say lion. Detroit.
So that's Emily. She's awesome. What's cool about Emily is that she just started posting on TikTok back in April of last year. She had 0 followers when she started. And now she's working with some of the biggest brands in the world. And I think what's really nice about that is that our team jumped on that trend early. They saw what she was doing. And then when she came at us, rather than staying dormant and just saying, well, we're not going to touch this with a 10-foot pole, we actually came back at her and trolled her in the same way that she was trolling us. And it unleashed a ton of great content. And shout out to the Lions as well, or the Detroit Lions. They also did a terrific job in engaging with her. And she'll be with us at Super Bowl. We're going to have a bunch of these young content creators with us at Super Bowl that focus on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. Around the Super Bowl, which is going to be really fun.
Do you want to share some other things you have planned?
Got a few things planned.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Tim alluded to what we're doing with Snapchat in terms of extending the campaign for Super Bowl. I think it's one of the best AR executions that we've ever done. It's really fun. Our players were messing around with it at Pro Bowl last week. They had a ton of fun with it. We're also projecting fan tweets onto the roof of SoFi Stadium. So it's part of their Tweet It Into Existence campaign. So we've worked with them to unleash this. So real fan tweets will be shown on the roof, and it'll be part of a much larger activation that we're doing with Twitter. TikTok just announced this morning, we're doing a TikTok tailgate, which is the second year they've come back now, and that'll be out in the parking lot. So live programming across TikTok. Super, super excited about that. And there's a variety of other things that I could get into, but those are just a few smatterings of what we're up to.
Embrace the fire. I'm gonna stick with that one because
Embrace the fire.
humor looks good on the NFL. I like it. I think it's working.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean it just goes back to providing the creators a bit of a sandbox and not trying to over manufacture. I think with someone like Emily as an example, we have so many other we can point to. As soon as you start to do that, it loses the cool factor and probably the engagement flies off a cliff. So I think what was really nice about that was just the level of empowerment that she had.
Do you have time for a question, or we gotta
We do
wrap
have
it up?
time for one question.
One question? Okay.
How do you identify when to pull resources off of a social media platform that may not be doing well? Facebook's an older crowd. How do you figure that stuff out?
Yeah, so good question. We try to drive a level of efficiency across, right? So I would say that, even platforms that might be aging up or you have some disruption with their user growth and so on, it doesn't mean that they're still not viable, right? I think there's tons of ways to exercise these platforms in different ways. We try to just drive a level of efficiency so we're not over-resourcing it, but at the same time, we're not completely abandoning it because we have to remember these platforms are massive, right? You think about Twitter and you think about Meta and their overall properties that they have. It's super, super important not to let go of the rope. And I would just recommend that for all of you that oversee your social groups. Just because one is dipping doesn't mean it's irrelevant. It means that you may want to reallocate a few things. What I would say is continue to invest and add more to make sure that you've really got experts who are focused on each one of those platforms versus I have one social person that's programming Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. It's no one person can do that. And so for us, we have a really, I think, amazing young team that understands the platforms really well, and they understand the nuance of each one.
We do one more. I have a question. Yes, Glenn, please.
Oh, here we go. This is going to be good. Should I stand up?
It's a complimentary question. Glenn go for 72andSunny. Hard to hear through Max.
My N95 is working. I'm Glenn Cole from 72andSunny. Been fun working together. The compliment before the question, from where folks like Evan and I sit, working with a lot of different clients, the relationship between a creative company, a creative agency, and a social team or a social agency can be weirdly a point of friction. They're both creative entities churning out a lot of stuff, even if you're agreeing on the strategy side of things. So it's just been such a breath of fresh air to work with you, your team, the NFL. It's nothing but generative and complimentary. And honestly, it feels like magic to me. So I just encourage anybody when you're having a beer or something later, that's the question to ask is what does he do to foster that kind of environment? Because we really appreciate it. That's a compliment.
Thank you. I feel the same way. And then just to add on that point, I think the beautiful thing about having an agency like 72 is they can set the broader creative vision, right? And the strategy on what we're doing from a creative perspective with our brand team and others. And it gives us a North Star to point towards to make sure that we're staying on the same track together. And then where we can extend the stories, we're happy to do it. And once you unleash the social ecosystem of the NFL, it's a lot of fun, right? That includes players, influencers, colleges, the league channels, club channels. It can get really loud really quick. And so for us to be able to extend those campaigns in different ways is a lot of fun for our group.
Well, thanks, Back. The question, it's a simple one. You said at the beginning, somebody who didn't get on TikTok missed out on 500 gazillion followers. If they get in a year later, you look at the metaverse, where should brands make their bets in the beginning of early days metaverse?
Okay, yeah. So I would probably steer it a slightly different direction. Like I think that I would just say this, that the metaverse has been around a long time, right? Like I think the term metaverse is now really gaining traction with people like us in a big way. But when we think about metaverse, it's just evolving and it's growing. It's growing at a very rapid speed. So I think embracing games, certainly like we have with Roblox and with Madden and Fortnite, that's one piece of it. But then there's also other pieces of it where you're building out these AR experiences and ways for fans to really express themselves. And that's what this comes down to. Are you allowing them to express themselves in cool ways? And if you can do that, whether it's on Snap or it's on Instagram or it's on TikTok, it almost at that point doesn't matter because you're trying to unlock that same use across platforms, including games.
Yeah, that's a better answer.
I just want to thank Ian for finding yet another reason to make fun of my Detroit Lions and sponsoring by the NFL. So thank you for that embarrassment.
Anytime.
And I would like to also thank you both for sharing so much with us today.